One, two, three. Hello and welcome to X-Rated, the X-Men animated review show, exclusive interview series. Our next exclusive interview, tonight's actually, is with Robert N. Skir, writer, very prolific writer. You could say even like shaper and former of André and I. As young children.
Yes, we have you to blame for what you see before you.
You'll know who to turn to in years to come. Yes,
that's right.
Or thank,
thank
or blame.
Yes,
Depends on who you talk to. We are your hosts, Davan and André, and yes, we are talking to Robert N. Skir tonight. André,
yeah,
take over for a minute.
Take over for a minute, all right.
Before we begin, I go by Bob.
Oh,
okay,
great.
Bob.
Sure,
no problem.
Bob, it is. See, right. the Robert De Niro way. It's just straight up.
That's Bob. Right. Yeah. Because Robert N. Skir is very much my screen credit, but everybody who knows me as Bob.
Is there like this is a side note, but is there like if you went like when you're doing the credit, because I do a bit of film work, but I don't remember anybody ever asking me specifically what I wanted my credit to be. It's just anything I've been in has just been my name. And it must have been something I filled a long time ago that I never realized. But is there like, are you allowed to just go by Bob Skir if you wanted to, or is just Robert just sounds more official for like?
I have one episode of a show that I did as Bob Skir. And in retrospect, I wish I had done it as Bobby Skir. Because it was an episode of Godzilla. And it was a dream come true episode where I had Godzilla go through my town and destroy everything. My high school and my grade school and my house. And he stomped through East Norwich. He stomped through Oyster Bay. And when I was a kid, I was just obsessed with Godzilla. When I'm a fan of something, I'm obsessed with it. And I'm a fan of a lot of things. Mm. And so when I was a kid, I was, all about Godzilla. And so when I worked on the Godzilla series, I had to write an episode where he went to my town. And it was around the time that my dad was getting remarried. So I flew back there and I took tons and tons of pictures of the town so that when I came back and I wrote the script, I was able to give all these pictures as references for the director. And like, I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be a big imposition for him. And he's like, you did my work for me. I don't have to. It says school. Now I got to look up schools and pick it's like, now that you give me all these designs, I don't have to do any of the research for it. So he was like super happy. Yeah. I was super happy because the show looked like where I grew up. And it was just, yeah. So anyway, I was Bobby Skir back when I was a big Godzilla fan, back when I was like, 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever. And so I have my screen credit instead of Robert N. Skir, it's Bob Skir. But yeah, I probably would have gone back and did Bobby Skir as kind of like, this is revenge. It's
How was the animated likeness of your town?
It was spot on. They just they used pictures and they designed it based on the pictures, and they were just you can see my house in that episode for about 20 frames, and then Godzilla comes right down on it.
So you want Godzilla to smash your house, though. If your house is going to be in a Godzilla,
that's pretty great.
Yeah, absolutely.
I remember they're putting out
like it was a dream come true.
Yeah, they're putting out Godzilla comics like a while, maybe 10 years ago or something. They had a thing that each comic shop could get their own unique cover that was their shop getting crushed by Godzilla. So I remember Strange Adventures in Halifax got that one done. So was New York where you grew up?
Yeah, I grew up on Long Island, in a little town called East Norwich, which is inside a larger township called Oyster Bay. Mm-hmm. And it lays claim to being the home of Teddy Roosevelt and Billy Joel. And you can decide between the three of us, which is, the most important person.
Bob Skir.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going with Billy Joel. I think, the Stranger album alone puts him head above.
I suppose as being an American president and being an American, Roosevelt would have more more cultural significance to you than Billy Joel would have for me. So I'd probably have to go with, I mean, Present Company, obviously, but Billy Joel would probably be up there for me as well.
Yeah, but Teddy Roosevelt wound up on Mount Rushmore for the X-Men, and he didn't. So I think I'm ahead of him.
Look, I've never been to Mount Rushmore, but I've watched and read a hell of a lot of X-Men. So it's like it's all perspective.
There you go. Well, watch North by Northwest, and you can. It's.
I love North by Northwest. We covered it on my movie podcast, actually.
Okay. It's a great movie. That shows what it would have been like if Cary Grant had played James Bond. Because he would have made a great James Bond.
He would have, yeah. There's that new movie coming out about him with Jason Isaacs playing him. It's like his life story.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks pretty interesting. I just saw a trailer for it the other day. He actually looks pretty good for the part.
They interviewed Cary Grant once, and it's like, everyone wants to be Cary Grant, and he's like, yeah, everyone wants to be Cary Grant. I want to be Cary Grant.
I love Cary Grant. If Cary Grant could play an X-Men character, who would he play?
Oh my God, I'll get back to you on that.
All right, think about that one.
I would get back to you on that. You know what? Okay. I'm gonna go completely left field here and say maybe the Beast. I don't know.
You see that?
He's got the charm and the wit.
Yeah. He certainly. He'd have to be like.
One of the Beast is he's somebody who's charming and has timing and.
Oh my God! It's so funny in North by Northwest when he's drunk at the police station and he calls his mother and he's like, "Mother, they forced me to drink a bottle of liquor."
Well, it's really wonderful. There's a scene where he's in a car and it's going nuts and it's mountainside in Glen Cove, and it's like, I've been to Glen Cove many times and I couldn't find a mountain anywhere. So
I was listening to another podcast where they're talking about how annoyed they are when especially because like Scorsese it doesn't do stuff. I don't think he does stuff like this. But like other directors that that generally other movies take place in New York, someone will go in one tunnel and then come out another one that is not like anybody that lives there knows that they're turn a corner and it's a whole other street or a whole other section of New York.
Wait a minute, he went in the Holland Tunnel and now he's in the Midtown Tunnel.
Exactly. People complain about that all the time. It's like unforgivable if you're like a New Yorker or I guess even if someone in LA and they pull something like that in a movie.
People get mad about stuff like that. And I don't think that's kind of reasonable because the idea of film and with editing, you can play with geography and, the fact that you know more about the place than other people in the audience. It's like, well, it's there's a scene in one of the Lethal Weapon movies where Mel Gibson is running up a street and it's in Santa Monica. He's running up this huge incline and then he's in front of the Chinese theater. And it's like, that's like 20 miles away, right? But it doesn't matter because that's the whole idea is you're supposed to be able to play with reality.
And who would know? Right? The only people that would know are the people that live there and that are paying that much attention or care. So, that's probably like a few hundred people and the rest of us who don't know the geography of LA or New York that well.
But then you watch the movie in Los Angeles and it's like, wait a minute, you can't do that. Like,
except one person just stands up in abject, defiance. Like, this is farce.
There's a phrase I use, which is in the world of the film. And in the world of the film, these two things are next to each other. Mm-hmm. They are not living in our world. Yeah. They are living in Lethal Weapon world.
That's fair.
So
it's a very fair point.
Just either give yourself over to it or complain to the people that they didn't make a documentary. And if you watch Lethal Weapon and you complain that it's not a documentary, bad news for you.
Before I toss it to Davan for another question, so was writing always something that were you interested in as a child, or was it like was there a path? Was it a certain writer that got you into wanting to be a writer, or anything to that effect?
Well, I've always found that I had kind of a writer/story editor gene in me, in that whenever I watch a show and someone would have a line of dialogue, I'd be like, it would have been more realistic if he had said it this way, or it would have been more clever if he had done that. Mm-hmm. And I'm like 6 years old watching cartoons doing that. So, I think it's always been ingrained in me,
This Mighty Mouse dialogue is very tripe. I mean, they could have.
That's right. Yeah.
They could have.
What do you really say that to Oil Can Harry? I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah. I think you would quote Nietzsche right here. I mean, that seems
There
to be
you
what
go. But it's like if something rang a false note, I would kind of hear it and I would play with it in my head. And it's like, so I've been this way my whole life. But I've always been interested in writing. I've always been interested in reading. It took me a hell of a long time for reasons unknown when I was in college to say, wait a minute, writing movies. Why don't I just do both?
Mm-hmm.
So my second year in college, I took a class in screenwriting, and ever since then, it's like, okay, this is what I'm going to be doing. So I went to the University of Virginia, and I majored in English.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew I was going to come out here to Los Angeles and screenwriter. And I told my parents, I don't belong here. I belong in a film school. And they said, no, we want you to get a liberal arts education so that you'll have something to write about when you do write movies. And I think they were spot on right,
That's like one of the most progressive attitudes I've heard a parent tell their kid, to go get a liberal arts degree. Like that's incredibly not something that you hear very often, a parent encouraging the child to go that route.
Oh, no. You hear it a lot, and I'll tell you why. My dad was an attorney, and his position was, you can do a lot of things with a degree in English, like law.
Yeah, I see.
With a liberal arts degree, you can go on directions, and that's the beauty of doing it. You specialize in graduate school.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're at a trade school, right? So,
right.
But they and some film schools are like trade schools. I'm not going to mention names, but there's one in Los Angeles that is not UCLA, and when you go there as an undergraduate, you focused on being one thing. So after you made your initial movie, it's like, okay, you're going to be editing from now on, and okay, you're going to be a cinematographer, and you were in school to learn that trade. At UCLA, they would have us making films, so we would write and direct and edit and produce. I mean, you'd make a movie, and when you were finished, that movie was yours. And they wanted to make filmmakers. They didn't want to make film technicians. And it's a difference in philosophy. I haven't been to USC. I haven't talked to people who have gone there in a long time. But at UCLA, they have this kind of philosophy that they're making filmmakers. So when I went to UCLA, I made a short film, but I was in the screenwriting program, because within it they had producing, and they had film production, and sort of like with cinema studies, with critical studies. They had critical studies, and so I studied screenwriting. They also had an animation program, and it was a 2-year program. So during the first 2 years, I wrote a lot of screenplays, and I was honing my craft. And 2-year program, 2 years and out. So when I started my third year, I decided to take some animation classes, because I'm like, I can't be at the best film school in the world and not take animation classes, when I was a huge animation fan as a kid, not just cartoons. I'm talking about, stop motion animation, all the Ray Harryhausen, Willis O'Brien,
nice.
Jim Danforth, Phil Tippett, all, stop motion. So it's like, well, how can I not take, classes in animation? And animation is where I made some of my best friends, because there was a real community there. When you're writing, you have a class and you talk about what you're writing, and then you go write, and you're off by yourself. And sometimes people get together and talk and stuff, but basically writing is a very solitary life. Well, animation back then, when it was all done with cells and drawing and everything, they had, a workshop at UCLA, and you'd go in there, and all the tables would have people, and they'd be there, drawing, or they'd be, inking and painting cells, and it was a big community, and like if you go to cinema studies classes, and like when I was an undergraduate, it was horrific. they'd be talking about Truffaut and Fellini and these great filmmakers, and they're just spouting all this stuff that all the directors they were told to love, and they would just spout about them. Oh, film noir, and I would just be disgusted because I knew what was good. And whenever I would open my mouth and mention things like Raiders, I would get laughed out of the room. Yeah. And I'm like, well, it was, they had classes in film snobbery is what it was.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. I was going to say some of it must have rubbed off. You have a Metropolis poster behind you, so.
Oh yeah, well, I know what good is. I loved German expressionism.
Yeah.
Me too. It's like I loved film noir because I love those movies, not because someone told me to.
Exactly.
When you love a movie like Raiders of the Lost Ark, I'm in the room and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, you like film noir because they tell you this stuff is classic. But if we were in this room 40 years ago and I mentioned The Maltese Falcon, you'd say, oh, Humphrey Bogart with his detective movies. Oh, he could be a detective. He gives the same performance in every movie.
Yeah.
And so, they'd be all snotty and stupid about it. But then, some French critic writes a treatise about detective movies and decides to call it film noir. Oh, it's black film. It's all about shadows and moral darkness. And suddenly, all the film snobs are like, yes, of course. It's like, I don't need someone to tell me what's good and what's not. And so I don't know.
I follow a similar idea in the sense that I'm like, there's nothing wrong with liking popular movies. Like, there's nothing wrong at all about it. Because I watch a lot of movies too, and I like pretty much everything for the most part. And it's like, I find, well, number one, I mean, the older you get, the more you realize that making somebody else feel bad for liking something isn't necessarily the way you should go about your life. Am I a big fan of I don't know, Tiny Tim or something? No, but am I happy that people listen to him and like him? Great. If you enjoy it, fantastic.
I never talk people out of movies that they like.
Yeah, I don't want to do that either.
I mean, I'll give a counter argument, but I won't tell someone they're stupid for liking something.
Yeah, ditto. Yeah. But there's a lot of other reasons why someone might like something that have nothing to do with your, the way their experience, their life, something that might speak to them that'll never appeal to you because you didn't have those experiences. So for whatever reason, if you want to enjoy your Michael Bay Transformers movies, go ahead. Not for me, but I'm happy that you're happy. They can get your dollars, they probably won't get mine. So
yeah.
But, I know what you mean. I find like because I as someone who's a big fan of cinema, it's easy to fall into that trap of like snobbery or elitism. But at the end of the day, you know what you like, and
there are many great films, great films that many people have not seen. And these people are, some of them are filmmakers, some of them are film fans, some of them are youngins, I don't know. But there's a lot of great films these people have never heard of. And whenever they, whenever I mention a movie like Apocalypse Now, and it's like, I've never seen it. My response is never, oh my God, you've never seen it? Wow, you are a lesser form of life than I am.
Yeah.
Which is the frequent response. And my response is, you have a lot to look forward to.
Yeah. That's the attitude. So you're gonna love
it. I could see Star Wars for the first time again. I'm looking forward to senility so that I can sit down and watch these movies. Or start recognizing these people as my friends and things.
It's like he doesn't want to see anybody; he just wants to keep watching Star Wars on a loop.
That's right. Yeah, but if someone hasn't seen Patton, I'm like, great, you have a lot to look forward to. It isn't like, I'm gonna make fun of them for not watching it. But here's the thing now with the internet. Now that everybody has a podcast, now that everybody can spew their opinions or give it on Facebook or wherever, you find that people love hating the things they are fans of. Nobody hates Star Wars quite like a Star Wars fan. Nobody complains about the Marvel movies quite like people who are actually fans of not just Marvel but the MCU. It's a very strange phenomenon, but people love to have kind of an ownership over something. as a fan, you had ownership over it.
What I find the most
And-
biggest part of that, for me anyway, is like with Star Wars specifically, because I'm a big Star Wars fan, and people that hate on it, it's like, look, I get it, but what I find mostly the root of it is that everyone has their opinion about where it should go, and if it doesn't go the way they want it to go, they're disappointed and they don't like it. Like what killed me about, like, they're like, okay, we're doing new Star Wars. Here's the Force Awakens, and everybody's like, oh, it's too much like the old stuff. And they're like, okay, well, here's the Last Jedi. It's wildly different than anything you've seen before. And everybody's like, we hate it. It's too different. And then they're like, all right, well, we'll try to split it down the middle and give you the third one. And then they're like, we hate this. It doesn't. It's inconsistent and that, and they're trying to change the tone too much. It's not matching either movie. It's like there's nothing that'll make you happy. Like there is and there isn't. But there's a specific when they're like, oh, I didn't like, Boba Fett because he's not the bounty hunter I want him to be in my head. And it's like, well, the studio probably didn't do that because they already had another show that was doing that. So let's make him different, make him a mob boss or do something. And they're like, well, that's not what I want to see. So I hate it. It's like, just give stuff a chance. Like, just enjoy it on face value for what it is. And don't be upset that it's not the head canon. Yeah.
Just enjoy it on its own terms.
Exactly. I mean, that's really hard for people to do that.
I did a Transformer series that was wildly different from any Transformer series that was done before, tonally and like in terms of form and content, but tonally and thematically, it was unlike any Transformers that had been done before. And I told the Transformer fans, I'm like, this is going to be very, very different. You might want to approach it with a little tolerance, or what you might call a grain of salt, because this is not your dad's Transformers, and the amount of resistance we got before it even aired was enormous. And then when it aired, it was like, Bob Skir ruined my childhood, which
I hate that phrase.
I did, but not with the show. I did it with a time machine. I actually went back and beat up these people and ruined their childhood.
I always made that joke. That came around so much when like the Ghostbusters movie, the female Ghostbusters movies came out. Everybody was saying this stuff, and I was like it's not like Melissa McCarthy's going to kick in your door and kick you in the nuts and take your copy of Ghostbusters. Just go watch the ones you like. Don't watch the new one if you don't want to watch it. But it's not taking away what you experience, what you love. Like, it's still there. Go enjoy it.
If they destroyed every previous iteration of Ghostbusters and you only had access to that movie, I could understand having
100%.
But I thought the movie was funny. I thought
it was fine. I thought it was all right.
It was really well directed. I thought the scary stuff that needed to be scary was scary. The stuff in it that was funny was funny. I thought they made great use of the original cast members. They had a great shout out to Harold Ramis in it.
Yeah.
And it's anybody who complains about it, it's like, shut up. If you didn't like it, then if you don't like, people hated that movie long before they ever saw it.
Oh yeah. They already decided they hated it before. Yeah, people before it even comes out, they're bombing it. Yeah.
I liked the Marvels a lot. Actually.
So did I. I just saw it the other day.
A lot of people are reveling in its perceived failure, and it was a failure and a bomb before it came out. So, congratulations, haters. I thought it was a terrific movie. I thought it was a terrific time. They delivered the movie that they wanted to deliver. It may not have been the movie for you, but they made a really good movie.
Yeah, I agree.
Iman Vellani is just delightful as Kamala Khan. I could watch her in 3 movies.
That's the thing. It's like, why torpedo the thing you love? Like, if you don't like this movie, then that's fine. But like, if you're reveling in every failure from the studio that isn't that's the content you want them to make, then they're eventually going to fail so much they're not going to make the content you want them to make. Like, in the end, it's just going to be nobody gets anything. Is any going to be happy? Like, it's ridiculous.
I didn't like Kamala Khan in her series, and then when I saw her in the movie, I found her very, very winning. I thought that in the context with the otother hero, that they were responding to her, I'm like, okay, this is totally cool. I mean, it's I would, and people are complaining, oh, well, you won't know who these people are unless you've watched, all the Marvel content, and you've watched, the Scarlet Witch, and it's like, okay, is it that difficult to get that character? Just if you're seeing her, they never gave her a code name. You know what her code name is, right? Or what it should be.
Photon or Spectrum.
Photon.
Or
It should be
Spectrum,
Photon.
yeah,
That
Photon.
was
or
the name of her
Spectrum.
mom's
Ship on the call sign.
jet. Yeah.
It has to
I
be.
was waiting for them to end with that, like for them to give her,
Me
for
too.
her to accept one of the names at the end, but they never went that route. I guess because of the way they left it for whatever they're going to do later.
I feel like that scene is sitting on a cutting room floor somewhere. I think they must have filmed
Probably.
Tag,
It was probably something where because the whole movie, Ms. Marvel, like Kamala Khan's giving her name suggestions and she's shooting them all down. So I figured at some point she'd say one that would stick. But Photon, I was expecting, but I figured it would probably be Photon because Spectrum was said earlier and she shot it down. So like in the movie, so I was like, yeah, we're going to land on Photon.
Yeah,
which
it would be Photon. And if you listen carefully, because after I saw the movie, after I saw the tag, I left the theater and went into another theater that was had 10 minutes of the movie left so I could see the tag again.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually referred to that to her mom, the alternate universe version, as binary.
Binary,
yeah. Binary. She's wearing the binary costume.
That was really good. And by the way, a lot of people hate the CGI of the surprise character at the end of the movie.
I thought he looked fantastic.
I thought he looked pretty great. I was pretty happy with it.
He looked exactly like he did in the animated series.
Yeah, it's the best he's ever looked on screen.
Yeah,
it's the best he's ever looked on film. So it's like, oh, that's bad CGI, and it's like he looks perfect. Fuck off.
Yeah, I know. I was so happy with that. So
to hear Kelsey Grammer delivering the lines as our Beast was
it was amazing.
It was super cool.
Yeah.
It was spoiled for me before I got there, but I was still really excited to see it, and I was not disappointed. I'm like, I hope this whole thing, like, I'm just a continuity nut, so I'm hoping this whole Secret Wars thing just ends in a new timeline where everything's together and we get it all. But whatever happens, I'm here for it.
They'll mash them all together in some fashion. So, Bob, this Transformer show that you used to intentionally ruin people's childhoods.
This weapon you made to destroy childhood.
That wasn't Beast Wars, was it? It was
in fact Beast Machines, which was the sequel to Beast Wars.
Yeah, it was the sequel to Beast Wars. Yeah.
Okay, so I didn't see that one. I saw Beast Wars.
When Beast Wars came out, the battle cry was, Optimus is not a monkey.
I liked Monkey Optimus.
That show has so much
Beast Machines. Beast Machines was meant to be a very spiritual take on Transformers. They wanted a series with spiritual themes, and my response, they literally said, "This is what we want," and I'm like, "No, you don't." It's like, no, we do, and I'm like, "Come on, this is a show about robots hitting each other. You don't want to do a spiritual." No, that's what we want, and I'm like, "Okay." So I called their bluff and I made it as spiritual as possible. And then the further and further I went, I kept waiting for them to say, "Whoa, slow down," or up too much. They never did. They liked everything we were doing. So
that's a rarity.
We made it. Well, we made what I call a 26 episode religious epic, and the fans were.
Now I want to go watch it.
They were extremely vocal. Back then the hardcore Transformer fans fucking hated me, and people who approached it with an open mind, liked it. And now, come to find, 24 years later, people think very fondly of that series.
Well, now I'm going to be interested to see if it comes up tomorrow, because we have this other show on our network called Trivial Debates, and we're doing a Transformers themed one tomorrow.
Okay.
And I'll be interested to see if that series comes up in any of the questions responses.
If it does, it might come up in a very it's a very controversial show, so nobody's going to say, "Yeah, I thought it was okay." They're going to either love it or absolutely despise it with a passion that approaches Jar Jar Binks.
I can't wait.
To me, it's like, you have so many seasons of different Transformer shows of them just hitting each other. So the concept of what is the religion or the religious aspect of these beings? Like, if you're a robot, you're a physical being as a robot. Your whole life is being mechanical. Like, what kind of spirituality comes with that? And that's very interesting. Like, to me, that's
well, they are machines. They're aliens who happen to be mechanical, but they have sparks. They have souls, and it's all about what happens in our souls. I mean, we are machines, right? We are meat puppets. But we have in our physical bodies, we have a spiritual center, and those people who believe in philosophy or spirituality or religion or whatever, there's a lot going on in terms of the soul, and that's very much what the series was about. It was very much about the sparks.
Interesting.
And people, some people thought that was fascinating. Some people wanted to see robots hitting each other.
No, I want to watch Peace Machines now. Sounds like my Transformers
show. It's a show about establishing a balance between nature and technology. And Megatron's point of view is, fuck organic life. We're just about machinery. We're just about, I want Cybertron to be a cybernetic world free from all this organic crap. And the audience was like, yeah. So, when you have a significant audience rooting with the villain, you kind of have a problem. And a lot of the hardcore Transformer fans, man, they were totally on board with Megatron.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but the show was about a balance, because initially it's like, okay, well, you have these Maximals who are half robot and half machine, and so you have these machines against. So it's like, okay, well, the obvious theme would be nature versus technology, and I don't happen to believe that either one of them is good or bad. Technology is as good or as bad as we decide to use it. Mm-hmm. But, nature's wonderful. It's beautiful. It's organic. Oh, there's nothing better than organic homegrown food. It's like, you know what? You know what else is organic? Dysentery and the plague. And, there's a cow manure is organic. Okay?
I make that argument all the time. Whenever someone's like, I don't like this stuff because there's chemicals in it. I'm like, chemicals is everything. You are chemicals. I'm like, and they're like, well, this is natural, and they're like, well, orange juice. I drink a lot of orange juice. I'm like, well, it's full of sugar. And they're like, well, it's natural. I'm like, arsenic is natural. Doesn't mean you should go drink it. Like, there's certain things
out there where somebody has a Snickers bar and it lists a whole lot of ingredients, this kind of ascorbic acid and this kind of this and this kind of that. And you read through it and it's like, oh my God, this is nauseating. I would never put that in my mouth. Then at the end, it says, this is the chemical composition of a peach.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, it's just trendy to be like, natural, but it's like even natural things, you break it down to their core components. It's a bunch of jargon that you're not going to understand.
It's not about nature versus technology, but finding the right balance between the two. And that's what the series was leading toward. And it took a while for our characters to arrive at that. But meanwhile, and that's, it's about a compromise. It's about a balance. And Megatron was not about a balance at all. He was he was an extremist character who stayed with what was, what he was extreme about. He didn't change his views. So that's what the series was about. And so there were lots of, philosophical moments in it, and a lot of, people talking about themes that went beyond, because in Beast Wars, there were episodes that began with Megatron saying, how will I bedevil these Autobots today? And I'm like, that's not really a really great motivation for your villain. This should be doing this. And it's like, in Beast Machines, we tried to have a real solid motivation for what it was that was driving Megatron. But the thing is, what you find is, if you make your villain's argument too reasoned, then a lot of your audience is going to go along with them. There's a thing where, okay, do you know why Superman is from Krypton? To explain why he can leap tall buildings in a single bound and why bullets bounce off his chest. He has these powers because he comes from another planet. But the more that they focus on him being, from Krypton and being Kryptonese, and he has a Krypton language and he has his own religion, Great Row, and all this other crap. It's like the more that you do that, the more that you do a disservice to a character who is meant to be an aspirational character. We should all aspire to be Superman. We should all aspire to find the Superman within ourselves. But it's like when you start talking about being an alien, you start to make him something else and something different. And it's really great when you have him, when Lex Luthor is this evil scientist who makes giant robots that rip banks apart, and Superman comes down and stops him. It made Lex Luthor into this imbecile, because if he's so smart, why isn't he running the town? And so now he becomes like Citizen Kane or Citizen Lex or the Kingpin, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And he's running Metropolis. And his philosophy is, because he's a super genius, his problem with Superman is an alien. And when he and Wonder Woman and the Flash and Green Lantern, when they come around using their godlike or alien technologies or whatever, and they solve all our problems for us, they're stopping us from evolving. Only by solving our problems for ourselves are we going to grow. It's kind of like if you do your kid's math homework every night, he's not going to learn how to do math. Well, writ large, Superman is not doing us any favors. And I can't argue against that, So when you start listening to that argument and it starts to make sense, it's like, well, do we really need Superman? Is he really doing us any favors by doing us all these favors? And
well, I feel like it's represented. Well, there's two things. The thing about Luthor I love, in my opinion, is that it all comes from jealousy. Like, he should be the who humanity holds as its highest champion. But because Superman exists and he gets it all handed to him because there's a yellow sun and now he has crazy powers, he's jealous because, all of his accomplishments are dwarfed by this guy who, they love. The other thing is, like, Superman almost seems like a half measure in a way that, like, sure, I'll go beat up the bad guys, but I won't, like, toss all the nukes in the sun or, like, go feed everyone on the planet at once. All these things he's clearly capable of doing. He just, like, it just seems like he's happy enough to just go punch bad guys in the face instead of actually, like, the amount of, if he stopped one bank, instead of stopping a bank robbery, if he, like, made a bunch of jungles in Africa and everybody could eat, then that would be a much better use of his time. And I like in certain
you can
books,
say the same thing about Storm. Why is these tornadoes to fight the blob when she could be in Africa gathering together storm clouds? It's in her name, and replenishing all these deserts into fertile that's the kind of question that kind of breaks the world. The reason that we want to aspire to be Superman is so that we do solve these problems. You want the audience members to say, what, if Superman can beat Lex Luthor and deal with this kryptonite, I can solve my problems, or writ large, I can maybe start solving the problems of the world. It gives you something to aspire to be something bigger than you are. In the fiction itself, why doesn't Superman use his powers to actually fix the planet? And those are the kind of questions that if you answer them the wrong way, it starts to break the world.
Yes, that's fair.
Storm does the best she can.
She does.
Davan's very much a Storm apologist, so
but the thing is, she was a goddess in Africa before Professor X found her, and she was helping people out. I would love to have seen an episode where she goes back to the people that she was a goddess of, and they're living in a desert now because she hasn't been there. How does she deal with the fact that she has let her people fail?
There is an episode where she goes back there, but they're not starving, I don't think. Or anything like that.
Yeah. I mean, they make it, it's like here she is visiting her home and she's seeing all of her old friends and stuff. And it's like, okay, that's fine. Or she's solving a problem that they have. But if you look at the problem, writ large, it's like, what happens? What is your responsibility to a world that you can help when you need to help a larger world at the same time? So, is Storm wrong? The Phoenix Five solved all the problems until the Avengers stepped in. Cyclops was right. That should be hashtag Cyclops was right.
Yeah, hashtag was right.
But the reason I have a problem with comics now is there's this thing called the reality fallacy. Movies are not real. They exist in a movie world. Comic books aren't real. They don't live in our world. they live in a comic book world, and that world has rules the way our world has rules. If you apply too much of our reality into the fiction of these worlds, and you start to break it. So you don't want to ignore social realities or political realities or whatever, but you also don't want to put them in first and foremost or foreground to such a degree that the world you're writing starts to crumble. So it really is a delicate balance. And I think that over the last few decades, that balance has become, well, it's gone completely out of balance. And I think there's too much reality fallacy in the comics these days. They put too many real world elements in it in a way that kind of breaks the world. So, having the X-Men, as a political comic now, and not like, I mean, in the old days they used to fight, and now it's they're having all these issues where they're on Genosha. No. Krakoa. They all live on Krakoa now, and they're dealing with the politics of how Krakoa is going to help the world find cures for disease, but in return they're going to get and it becomes about geopolitics.
And very geopolitical.
Whereas I said earlier, comics should be more than just people hitting each other. I think that Chris Claremont hit a really great balance when he put a great deal of psychological depth into the characters back when he was doing the book, particularly in the early 80s. But when the books become too much, when you insert too much of the real world into it, it starts to shadow the world. I was very grateful when Joss Whedon took over the X-Men and put them back. He put them back in costumes, and he started telling the kinds of stories that that made them superheroes. It wasn't just mutants against good mutants against bad mutants. I always found that really limiting. That was a rabbit hole they went down in X-Men in the early 200s of Uncanny X-Men back in the 80s. It's like as soon as the X-Men, the more they were outed as mutants and the more mutant hate they had, then suddenly it tilted the book. Because for a long time, the X-Men was a school for superheroes, and you'd graduate and join the Avengers. And they would fight people who were not mutants, and they'd also fight people who were mutants. But eventually it turned into, okay, well, the world hates us, and they put that front and center. And then suddenly it just becomes, okay, well, now they're just a persecuted minority, and they're fighting other people who are fighting bigotry a different way. And then the show, it becomes like it's Malcolm X versus Martin Luther King. And those were long conversations I had with the network executive over at Fox Kids when they were developing the series. I'm like, okay, well, these are the philosophies that are bumping heads, and this is what's going to make the series resonate and be a superhero show. Because I never thought X-Men was
Sydney, you were button heads with?
Say again now?
Button heads with Sydney over there?
No, I was talking with Sydney, telling Sydney, how the characters were butting heads with each other. But yeah, I'd be on the phone with him till like 2 a.m. We'd be like, talking about stuff. I mean, he was great. He made that series the great series that it is. It would have been a hero show, but that he was there making sure the show was really about something, and the fact that it was so thematically rich, I put right at his doorstep because he was pushing for that really hard. And
Sydney hasn't been on the show, but he's a friend of the show. We love Sydney over here.
I'm really glad but for him, X-Men and Batman would not have been the shows that people love. Sydney was responsible for getting Alan Burnett put in charge of the series as producer and getting Michael Reeves and Marty Pasco and Paul Dini as the head writers. And that's what made the series great. The first spate of episodes they did were really crappy. And I was reading the scripts and I'm like, oh my God, they're doing a James Bond Jr. series at Deke that is actually better than this. And it's like, they had a chance to do a great Batman series, and okay, they're making a cartoon. And then I read Heart of Ice by Paul Dini.
Oh man.
And that was the shot heard round the world. That's that's where the story is. It's like, okay, because I read that script. I put it at the bottom of a pile of scripts because it's a Mr. Freeze script. I mean, fuck that.
I mean, at that point, he was a
scripts,
nothing Batman villain. Like, nobody cared about him.
I'm reading all these different, villains, and I'm like, well, this kind of sucks. And I finally got to Mr. Freeze, and I'm like, okay, I'll read Mr. Freeze, and I'm like, this is amazing. This is the most amazing script, and that was the point. That was a flashpoint where, those guys, their works. So you have episodes like I Am the Night, and just suddenly this show has a lot of depth to it. And I just love the fact that you had two superhero shows being done at the same time for Fox Kids, and they were both so remarkably different. The way some people put it, I think maybe Sid or somebody it's like, okay, Batman is cool jazz, and X-Men is a garage band.
I think that's an Eric Lewald quote.
Okay. All right.
I feel like he said that when we had them on the show. Like, wait.
Yeah, I think he did.
Okay. That could be Eric.
Yeah, that's true though, because like the first episode of the series was like the Christmas one with the Joker, and the second one was like on Leather Wings or whatever, the one about Man-Bat. But like the Man-Bat one, not particularly, like, it was fine, but you're right. Heart of Ice is where, because at that point Mr. Freeze was a nothing character. He was killed off in like a Robin, I think it was like Robin 2 miniseries, and like with the Joker just got him with the joy buzzer, and like he was just a bad guy with freeze powers. He didn't have that whole tragic backstory, and that show really built that. And there are lines in that episode that I think are some of the best. Like when he explains, when Batman asks if he's really ready to kill, and he says, like, you think about
nice to meet you.
Well, that's not in that series. That's in the Batman and Robin film.
I mix that up.
But that film got the idea of him having the wife that was sick and the cryogenic freezing all from the series. But that line where he says, think about it, not being able to feel a warm summer breeze or touch the hand of a loved one, like you being encased in this ice prison. He says, I would kill for that. And with that cold voice, and it's just, it was so good.
Paul Dini. That's Paul Dini through and through. What he did was he especially got into the minds of the villains.
Tragically, they're all tragic.
He was brilliant at bringing out the pathos and also the comedy of how these critters think. And that was magnificent. I mean, if you look at the second two of that spate of Batman movies, if you look at Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, those are both taken from the animated series.
Yeah,
both of those movies. Poison Ivy was Paul Dini's Poison Ivy.
Yeah.
That Mr. Freeze was his Mr. Freeze. The Riddler story in the third movie came from me and Marty.
Really?
The idea that at the end, he's a computer criminal with virtual reality, and at the end, his brain turns into silly putty.
Right, that is right in the episode.
Here,
that's the Commissioner Gordon Bierman.
When they had Two-Face take all the coins and throw them in the air. Sorry, no. When he's flipping his coin and Batman throws all the coins in the air and thwarts him by having all the coins come down. That came from Michael Reeves. So they literally watched the Batman cartoons and took the stuff they liked. And then at one point, I went to a screening of something that the screenwriter was at. And he was like, oh, yeah, it's like when I was doing the Batman movies and I could watch cartoons and call it research. And so afterwards, I'm like, I wrote one of those episodes. And he starts backpedaling like a motherfucker.
Yeah, I didn't mean watch.
I didn't mean I really watched them. I just, I just sort of like, watched them.
Like, how difficult is it to navigate those waters, though? Like when you create these cartoon episodes and like so many things being made into movies now that they start to like borrow some of your ideas, like in trying to get the credit and like, even financial credit for like the ideas that you've had,
I was financially compensated when I wrote it.
Yeah. So you don't mind it being used again. Yeah.
That's the deal that we made. You make a deal and you live with it. They hire us to write the episodes. We don't get residuals. We might get foreign levies, which is a form of residual, but from Europe. They pay us and that's it. Like, we're not the author of our work, the producers are the author of the work. So, those, I'm sorry, those are air quotes. So, I mean, we do what we do, and it goes out into, the ether, and it's for people to use. I wish I could own these things, but, I don't own the characters. And a lot of what we're doing comes from other sources as well. And sometimes they're credited and sometimes they're not. I'm sure Chris Claremont was delighted seeing so much of his work, pillaged and otherwise scavenged for the animated series. One of the episodes I'm most proud of is Captive Hearts, which is where we introduce the love triangle between Jean Grey and Wolverine and Cyclops. And I love that episode all to pieces. I think it's an episode that shows the X-Men as who they are, better than a lot of the episodes that had preceded it, because it really went into, the characters were really motivated not by the circumstances, but by who they were. And that episode was based on some issues of the comic, and Chris Claremont wasn't credited for it, but here's the goofy thing about that episode, and I absolutely love it. The three major characters in it are Cyclops, Jean, and Wolverine. And in the issue the story came from, none of them were in the book.
Yeah, it was
Jean had died. Cyclops had gone off to mourn her, and Wolverine was off having a miniseries. Because back then they would keep track of where the characters were, and if Wolverine has a miniseries, then he can't be in the X-Men book. Unlike today, where Wolverine can be everywhere at the same time, no matter what's going on.
Oh yeah, by the time like 1990 hit, Wolverine could be in 3 books in the same month. Yeah. I like those days when it was all tight, though. It felt like a very real world.
We pillaged the story and made it into something else, but we were using elements that came from Chris Claremont. And as far as I'm concerned, that entire series is built on the shoulders of Chris Claremont and, for my money, John Byrne, because those issues were perfection. And that's where the X-Men found the voice that that gave them basically it for all eternity. You know what I mean? That's where it really started.
In all respect to
psychological resonance, that's where the artwork was a lot more sophisticated. I mean, the expressions that John Byrne drew and the kinds of attitudes he would give the characters were far beyond what other comics were doing at the time. So I credit John Byrne very much for upping Chris Claremont's game, and Chris Claremont, the two of them together, and then left. Claremont then cultivated the characters in other directions and made it really wonderful. I think John Byrne was the one who came up with Kitty Pryde initially, and he left the book shortly after introducing her. So Chris Claremont defined the character and made her into this incredible character. And Wolverine was a wonderful character when Byrne did the book. He really popped at that point. But afterwards, Claremont was doing stuff like making him basically a fallen samurai and, just kinds of different things with him, and developing him in other directions that were, as interesting. So, but yeah, in terms of what we were doing in the series, we borrowed and other people borrowed from us, and that's just, it is the way of things. But, when I watch the Batman movie and I see it's like, oh, okay, well, we came up with that, and watching the bit with Two-Face, and it's like, Michael, great. But you watch that fourth movie, right? And that Poison Ivy is only Paul Dini's. That version of Mr. Freeze is only Paul Dini's. And I think the reason that they had him playing, that he's played by an Austrian actor, was because they were hearkening back to the Adam West Batmans. And Otto Preminger played He played Mr. Freeze. And so it's like, well, we gotta get an Austrian. I mean, Arnold's really famous right now. Let's use Arnold.
I love the conceit of that, because it's like you know, he's like the world's leading cryogenic scientist, but he also probably spends 6 hours a day in the gym. Like, you know, he somehow manages to be able to do both. You know, like he's just like this ridiculous muscle man that's like also like the scientist. It just there's a, you know,
That's where he does his best thinking.
I get that's a good point. That's a good point. That's the writer. That's the writer figuring it out.
There you go. Hefting the weights. It's like that's where he finds his Zen place, where all of his ideas came from.
Yeah, you better
I
ask an
guess, I
X-Men
don't know.
question before I, because I have one about one very important show to my childhood that nobody remembers that seemingly but me. So I'll let you throw some X-Men questions in before I get obscure.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you have an X-Men movie script?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. In 1990. Well, okay. I came out to Los Angeles to go to UCLA and study screenwriting. And my goal always from the get-go, because I started working on it, years before, I wanted to write an X-Men feature. I wanted to write the X-Men. And during my first year, I was talking to one of my professors, and I'm like, you know what? My dream is to write a feature film based on a comic book series called X-Men. And he's like, a comic book. And
that'll never fly, Joe.
His eyes just dim.
Well, what have I brought into my school?
I got out there in '83, and I started, studying screenwriting, and I was working on the kinds of scripts, that one writes in film school. I learned my craft over time. I wrote a lot of shitty stuff, started writing better stuff. I waited until 1990 when I considered myself a good enough writer to actually sit down and write the X-Men script. I wanted to wait till I was ready to write the right script the right way. And what prompted me to do it at that point was Batman had come out, and I thought it was awful because I'd read the original Sam Hamm script before it got fixed. And
Burtonized.
It was such a better script than it was a movie, and I was just left behind by it. I'm like okay, this movie, I would give this movie a C+, whereas it could have been an A+ movie. And for a lot of people, it is an A+ movie, and I'm not going to talk them out of it. I just happened to have read a script that showed how much smarter and better it could have been. But I saw that, and then I saw Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was a huge success, and the whole world knew what mutants were now. They were turtles who ate pizza and yelled cowabunga. And I'm like, someone's got to fix this. And someday they're going to find the X-Men, and they're going to do an X-Men movie, and it's going to suck. And I want to make sure that the X-Men is done right on paper at least once by me. And I sat down and I wrote a screenplay in 1990. It's a distillation of everything I loved in the Byrne Claremont issues. Basically, it's a love letter to them. So I took a whole bunch of story elements from it and some stuff from beyond. I mean, I was lifting from all over the place to make something, a 2-hour presentation of why the world should love the X-Men. And it's built on the foundation of the story is something terrible is about to happen. So the X-Men is forced to bring in a new recruit named Wolverine, who is not fitting in very well at all with simply anybody. And that was sort of the foundation of the story. But a lot of the story, was taken from Days of Future Past, and some of it was involving the Mutant Registration Act, and it was just, but it's my distillation, and I still think it is a better representation of why I love the X-Men more than any of the movies that got made. I think they all have, their pluses and minuses. Some of them are, better than others. I have no problem inherently, fundamentally with any of the movies, because like the first movie falls short because they had a very...
They all fall short for me. Like I believe your statement entirely.
The first one falls short because they didn't have the budget to do everything that they could have done. And back then they didn't have the technology either.
And that was in the black leather X-Men days.
But,
and,
No. But where the movie falls short, it's a crimes of omission because they didn't have the budget. What they needed to get right, they got right. They got Cyclops right. They got Wolverine pretty right. Some of the characters like Storm, I didn't love, but
Not
what made
right.
the X-Men the X-Men? Where they fit in with their cosmology, where they fit in the world and society. That movie very handily. When you walked out, you knew who the X-Men was, and I'm like, okay, well, they did the job they needed to do. It could have been better with a bigger budget and with people who got the characters yet more, but they did a fine job. But my script is from somebody who deeply, deeply loves the characters and understands Storm more than what they did in those movies.
That's what I want.
That first movie,
I want Storm to be represented right on live action just once.
Yeah, well, my script did it. My script was your Storm. The Storm in the movies, I don't know who the fuck she was. I know that in the first movie they spent $3 on that wig, and
they should get that $3 back.
And I didn't know who she was as a person. I mean, they just got her completely wrong. I got all the characters right.
Strength and power and just like energy and none of the things.
Well, a lot of it, but what she's about is restraint.
And restraint.
She can't let her powers go crazy like Cyclops. If she unleashes her powers, then she could cause cause hurricanes. I mean, she's so she has to keep herself deeply reserved. And Wolverine gets along with her, as you might expect. Like what he's trying to do is tell her that she should, you have a beast inside you, unleash it. And she's like, I can't. And so
destroy the planet.
it becomes a huge conflict between them that reaches a several what I consider pretty satisfactory conclusions, because it's like they each meet each other in different ways. Like when she needs to unleash the power, he gets her to do it, and later on when she succumbs to her claustrophobia, he's there to help her. And that's why I say, by the way, that the Captive Hearts did a better job of dealing with the characters as characters than had been done before, because it dealt with Storm having to assume the mantle of a leader in a situation that would not allow her to excel because she's dealing with her claustrophobia. And then you have Gambit saying, Wolverine, you're a leader, you're a military guy, you need to take over. And Wolverine saying, no, Charlie put her in charge. She's our leader. We're not doing a mutiny here. We're following her. And that follows. Wolverine is not just an angry guy with claws. He has a whole moral center to him. And he has a philosophy of honor that he follows. And so
in an age-old wisdom, because he's so old. Like he has a wisdom about him too.
Well, yes, he does. And so he's not going to usurp Storm's position. Other people think that it's like it's like put her in charge because Storm's an inch from freaking out, and he's like, we're supporting her. That's it. And that's where I really that's where I feel a lot of the strength of the story comes from. It's the characters. The characters are showing the strength of their convictions, and they're very specific. They're not just. In another series with different writers, they could have just been broad stroke characters. They could have been defined by their powers. And I made sure
we loved your episodes. The ones you wrote for this series, we loved your episodes, like Captive Hearts, A Rogue's Tale, Days of Future Past Part 2.
I also wanted to add that
Savage Land, Savage Hearts, another great Storm one. Like,
Savage Land, Savage Hearts was entirely Marty's. That was completely on his desk. I was doing a Batman episode called Lockup at that point, of which I'm extremely proud. But yeah,
it's a great episode.
With the Savage Land, Savage Hearts was Marty all the way through. That being said, when he gave me the script, I went through and I was fucking with all the dialogue because I didn't hear how the characters talk. So a vast majority of the dialogue. But I mean, it's an action episode and it's Marty all the way. And I think he just did a spectacular job on it. So, my hat's off to him.
What do you find are the benefits of a partnership, a writing partnership?
And by the way, Days of Future Past, I do, but I wrote like 75% of the outline for part 1. because
Oh,
of
really?
where I needed things to line up for the beginning of part 2. I needed to kind of set the chess pieces, and before I knew it, I had pretty much talked about where all the characters needed to be in the beginning of the story. And something that occurred to me was I needed to send Bishop back into the future because he was in the past. And the X-Men don't have that kind of technology. Like, how are they going to send him back into the future? So I came up with the idea, which I stole from Harlan Ellison. Okay,
Demon with the glass hand. I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, I lifted that because the idea was, okay, what if he has this piece of tech, and if you rip it off, he goes spiraling into the future. I took it from Harlan. I never talked with him. We were friends. I never had a discussion with him about it.
Oh, really? Oh, wow,
that's really cool. There, but yeah, that's where I got that from. But I then needed to write, the scenes in the first episode. I'm like, okay, well, he gets together with Forge, and Forge is talking about this, time displacement bands, and there's that term, there's that phrase. It's like, well, it's a working theory. It's like they're aligned to dialogue. Oh, and when he first gets to the Bronx, and he thinks he's still in this fallen future because it's the Bronx. And he's like, oh my God, I didn't go anywhere. I'm still here. And then he sees children playing, and he's like, there are children playing outside in the daylight. What's going on? It's like that's all me. So awesome. A lot of that first, I probably should have shared a story credit in that first episode, but
it makes sense. I mean, you would have had it laid out that way.
I was wondering how they sync them up so well, because they do that a lot in this X-Men series where they split up the writers on the two-parters.
I told them what had to happen in the first episode in order for the second episode to map out okay. And also, I loved the idea of ending the first episode, with having the two characters coming in, and then starting the second episode showing where the characters are coming in from before they go in. So it's like it starts before the previous episode ended, but it starts a few minutes before. So you're getting this sort of
yeah, I thought that was neat too.
I love doing that.
Before I ask my other question, I wanted to just, when you talked about sort of those classic Batman animated series episodes, Lockup is one of my very cool episode, but I think his Silicon Soul is one that definitely should be in the same message as some of those other ones, as far as like when talking about episodes that like had a real sway on the mythology of the character and some of the interesting stuff like that. I love that episode, and it's fantastic. I like growing up, Beetlejuice was a cartoon I watched a lot as a kid, so it's cool they worked on that. But the one that I talk about,
our first gig.
Oh, really?
Our first show was Beetlejuice. We got to pitch an idea for the series when they were deep into production, and we were very lucky to be able to, if we're lucky, we'll sell an episode, and we sold an episode, and then we wrote another one and another one, and by the time the smoke cleared, we had written 7 out of 65, which is a really gargantuan percentage, all things considered. So I was really, and that was all Sid. Sid got us in the door, and we were writing for Mike Everly Wald. Yep. And so that's the very first guy who hired me was my first story editor was Eric, and awesome. We were brought in because of Sid. So I owe everything to Sid, and I am deeply grateful to Eric. And
I owe that tidbit about your X-Men movie script to Sid. So we all owe Sid something.
Well, the show that I remember, I watched all it, like where I grew up, rural Nova Scotia, like as a child, there's only like 2 channels on the regular television. So I watched whatever the kids' cartoons were that were on those channels. And one that I loved growing up, that every time I bring it up, few people seem to remember, was Dog City.
Right, yeah. I watched Dog City.
I love that show because like I was a kid that wanted to be an animator. It was about an animator who was drawing a show, and talking to his own cartoon character about like a noir dog detective story. And I even think as a kid, made my own little comics called The Dog Detective that was just aping kind of what I was seeing on the show because I liked it so much growing up.
I'm glad you liked it.
Was that a
Two
Henson thing?
observations.
Was
One is,
that
most
that
of the
through the
stuff
Henson
for
studio?
that series, I think Marty was first chair on that show. Like a lot of the episodes that you're seeing reflect Marty a lot more than they reflect me, and they're wonderful. I mean, I'm saying that like like Marty did great stuff for that show. I did too. I mean, there were a few episodes that were on my desk primarily, but like Simply Mad About the Dog, the one where Bruiser takes over as the head of the head of the family or whatever. Anyway, the thing about that show was we were writing scripts and there were Muppet scenes and there were animated scenes. And we had all of these, the animated scenes were like, this incredible kind of pacing and just sort of like moody and whatever. And they got antic and fun. And then we'd have these little interludes with the Muppets and you quickly leave and go back to the cartoon. Well, because this was a Jim Henson project, and because you had these Muppeteers, and all the scenes with the dogs moved really slowly, and they were fun, and they were just really and they moved at their own pace, and so they would eat up so much fucking time. Things would have to move like a bat out of hell. So it's like, we would write scenes that would be like tick, 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 tick. And it would come back tick, 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 tick. Because those puppets were eating the whole fucking show.
Yeah. I just, as a kid,
I love that show. It was a great show to do. I have cells from it here.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was a delightful show to do, and we got to, we got to write for puppets. I'd never written for, like the Muppets. It was a great chance to write for, it's Jim Henson. I mean, how wonderful is that? It was a great show to write for, it was a lot of fun. And it was also a great, if you will, kind of a sorbet. Because the thing is, we started on Beetlejuice and it's like, oh my God, they know we're funny. They're not going to let us do action now. So we were afraid we'd never get invited on a show like Batman. And one of the ways we got on was when they were developing X-Men, because I'd written the X-Men screenplay, I became like the X-Men advisor, the X-Men expert. And so I was there helping during the development of the show.
So did you shop your script around for X-Men? Like, was that in the hands of studios and stuff?
My feature?
Yeah.
I sent it around to different people. It even wound up in Avi Rod's hand at one point.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but I wanted my story to happen pretty much at the foundation of the X-Men when it was just, the people that, the 5 X-Men who were on the team. Yeah. They wanted to pick it up a lot deeper into the mythos. So when we get there, the school is completely populated by mutants. And
that's
I
what
thought
they
it was
ended
a
up
huge
with.
Mistake. I thought they should have grown the world as opposed to establishing it was already there. But yeah, I mean, they saw, Avi Arad read my script. And because of that, he remembered it. That's one of the reasons he hired us to develop X-Men Evolution. So I'm very, 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 very happy that I wrote that script. When I wrote it, I didn't tell anybody I was writing an X-Men script. I sat down and I just really, just poured everything into it. And then I gave it to Marty. I'm like, Marty, I wrote a screenplay. I'd like you to read it. And he told me that when he opened the first page and saw it said X-Men, he said, when I saw that, I groaned. Why did you waste your time writing this? You're never going to be able to sell it. You don't own this because you can't sell this unless you sell it to or through Marvel. Why did you waste your time with this? And the short answer was because I didn't want to go insane. Also because this is why I'm here.
Yeah.
But because you had to get out. Because I had written that put me in a great seat to be in for helping develop the X-Men series for Fox. And then it was the reason we got hired for X-Men Evolution. So, there's a lot to be said for indulging in your insanity. And that was a case where I just indulged in my insanity because I needed to write that screenplay. And to this day, I'm incredibly proud of it. I think it's a terrific script.
Oh man, is that available online or is it just private? Like, is it?
It's not available anywhere.
I'd love to read that.
Me too.
But if you send me an email, I will return your email with a copy of the script.
Oh, Davan,
I will send you that email tonight.
Please forward that to me when you get it.
Yeah. And you know what?
Amazing.
Okay, I will give it to you with the proviso that you don't pass it along to other people.
Oh, no,
I don't want this to be just sent out willy-nilly. But also,
we're good secret keepers on this show.
I'd like for you to read it and give me honest feedback.
Sure.
Oh, I will.
Did you ever hear about
I'm an X-Men psychopath, so I will definitely tell you what I think.
Did you ever hear of a podcast called The Best Movies Never Made? It's hosted by Josh Miller, who wrote the Sonic movies and the new ones, and Steven Scarlatta, who did like Jodorowsky's Dune and a few other things. Like he does documentaries about movies that never got made. That's kind of started this thing.
Like Superman Lives.
Yeah. I don't know if he was involved with that. He just did a show.
No, but like the movie.
Yeah, exactly. So he
according to Jodorowsky's Dune.
Yeah, he did that documentary.
We never would have had Alien.
Yeah.
You know that.
So
movie,
they read these scripts and talk about.
That movie never got made, but it changed the trajectory of movie history.
The doc, you haven't seen it. It's really cool because they go into what it would have been and the whole history of it and everything. Anyway, these two guys just read scripts that for movies, like famous movies that didn't make it to or through production, like and so I'm very excited. Like they did James Cameron's Spider-Man movie and all those ones. So they read the script and they talk about it, and it's always very interesting to read about.
Written script for Spider-Man.
They did a 4-part series that covered because it kept getting changed. They went through the first one and then the various versions of it, and they even talk about certain scenes that carried over and changed. And then Cameron's one kind of was a reboot of what had come before it. There were a bunch of ones with Doc Ock, and the Cameron one was interesting. It was like, I think Leonardo DiCaprio was set to be Spider-Man.
Electro, wasn't it?
Yeah, it would have been Lance Henriksen would have been Electro as the villain.
Oh, actually, I thought it was going to be Arnold Schwarzenegger as the Sandman.
That would have been interesting.
I never heard that. That's interesting.
And one of the reasons the Sandman was actually never in the Spider-Man series was because they were holding him for the movie, is my understanding.
He was in the Spider-Man series. Yeah, because he was
in the cartoon.
No, Hydro Man was. You're right. They swapped him out for Hydro Man.
They avoided Sandman, and I think they were avoiding him because he was going to be in the feature, which seems really inane.
Well, that was in the Cameron script. Henriksen isn't quite the Electro we know. He's like a super rich, powerful mobster that used his electric powers to get to this position. He also had a belief that like humans altered by technology is the next step of evolution. So he's trying to like surround himself with altered humans that have technologically altered. So that's what draws him to wanting Spider-Man to join him. But he is a nameless henchman who never says anything or talks. And then is revealed to eventually be Sandman when it becomes important, like when there's a fight and he needs to step up. So that was part of the script, and there's a few other things too. It's very different. It was a very strange take on it, but it's a cool show. And it might be something interesting if you ever feel like putting that script in those guys' hands. It might be something that'd be cool to be in because they usually have the people that worked on it or have some connection to it on the show talking about it while they're doing it.
Well, send it along to them and see if they feel like reading it and talking about it.
Sure. If you have permission to do so. Well, I don't know them personally, but I'm a fan of the show, so
I'll see that's something they're interested in. Reach out to them and see if they have any interest.
I mean, that'd be great.
I'm sure that there were plenty of scripts like mine where people just try and write screenplays based on things that they don't have rights to. And
well, there's some that like the cool beauty of the show is just seeing what could have been. It's also the tragedy of that show because there's so many things that make you so sad they never got made. Like there was sequel. There's a sequel to The Thing that was actually really cool. There was like Guillermo del Toro's Mountains of Madness they talked about, which would have been so cool. There was the Ash versus Freddy versus Jason movie that never got made. That would have been super fun. Like the script for that is so fun from what they described.
Oh, you know what I just saw the other day again for the first time since I first saw it was Drag Me to Hell. Drag Me to Hell is a slapstick horror movie. It's as slapstick as The Evil Dead, but it's not funny. But it's slapstick. So you find yourself like screaming at all this incredibly vile images. And
the whole movie is about like if you look at there's people talking about this online, so I'm not revealing any like secret unknown thing. But like if you look at the in-betweens about the character and her story, it's all about bulimia and anorexia, and how her character is like, because they talk about her being fat before, and there's all these pictures of her being young and being fat. And like if you read the whole story, it can almost be a parallel to like body dysmorphia and like hating the way you look and trying to change it, leading into this whole thing that leads to the whole other story. But it's all kind of hidden in there.
Look into that.
Yeah, if you watch it again, watch it with that bend, and you'll see it. You'll see it the whole time.
Okay.
Yeah, it's super cool. I love Sam Raimi. Like he's great.
I'm glad he got to do a Doctor Strange movie.
I loved it. People hate it, but I loved it. I thought it was great.
But here's the thing: is he did Spider-Man and he did Doctor Strange. So basically, it's like he's the Steve Ditko of movie making.
There's a great
that way.
There's something I just discovered recently.
I love seeing Spider-Man paired up with Doctor Strange in some of the movies, because it's like, because they came from the same place.
Yeah. I never thought of it that way. That's really cool.
Yeah.
One thing that's kind of interesting, it's just a side note that I learned it recently. So, do you know who Charlie Band is? You're probably familiar with Charles Band's movies. Okay.
A friend of mine actually was his head of development for years.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
What the dream would have been. I wish I had pushed for this, because they probably would have let me write it. Although, they would have paid me like $1,500.
Yeah, that's how he normally operates.
But I always wanted to do Laser Blast 2.
Oh, wow.
I love that movie so much.
Well,
I think Mark Hamill is actually in it.
Possibly. The original Laser Blast?
Yeah, I think he's he might have like a small scene in it or something. But at one point they're driving along and he's got that gun and he blows away a giant billboard for Star Wars.
Well, he's been on so at one point, like back, I want to say it's in the 80s, he had the rights very briefly to make a Doctor Strange movie. And he had started putting things in place to do it. But then the rights reverted or something happened, and then that was taken away from him. So he still basically made the Doctor Strange movie, but just changed the names of the characters. So I think it was called Dr. Druid? Or Dr. It's, oh man. It basically is what Charles Band's Doctor Strange movie would have been. And Jeffrey Combs played Doctor Strange, the Doctor Strange stand-in in this. So it's out there. I think
who directed it? Was it Stuart Gordon?
It's funny because I'm a huge Stuart Gordon fan, but no, I don't think so.
I would kill to see a Stuart Gordon Doctor Strange movie with Jeffrey Combs in it.
Me too.
That would be this is I would love to see that too. I love Stuart Gordon I love
Jeffrey Combs.
Well, they work together a lot. I think like on Reanimator and From Beyond are two of my favorite.
Reanimator was like ground zero.
Yeah, but even a
lot of us had been very disappointed. It was 1985. A lot of us were really disappointed when Day of the and Day of the Dead, by the way, was supposed to be a much bigger movie.
I liked it.
They wanted to do Indiana Jones, basically, an Indiana Jones kind. Like it was supposed to have a really big budget, and they cut the budget back by about, like to a tenth of what it was. So they had a very different movie that they were going to make, and it was much bigger. And Rhodes actually was like king of this little town, and he was like feeding people to the zombies. And
oh, really?
Oh, so anyway. I was left behind by that movie. I'd say it was such a letdown for me. And so 6 months later, when Reanimator came out, it was like, oh my God, this is more like it. There were times in that movie because of, when it came out, like if you look at it now, it's not quite as effective. But back then it was like, I can't believe they're doing this. I literally can't believe they're doing. There's no other movie in film history where you get to see a talking head giving head.
Yeah. The first, actually, it's funny because
I say that as a challenge to David Byrne. By the way, David Byrne, if you want to be a talking head giving head in a movie,
well, talking
anytime, anywhere.
That movie, if you want to look it up, it was directed by Charles Band. It was Charles and his father, Albert Band. It's called Dr. Mordred. It came out in 1992. But it involves the Philosopher's Stone and the fourth dimension, and Brian Thompson, who is like a character actor that's been in a lot of stuff. You may recognize.
That's a
him
Star
from-
Trek. Yeah.
Yeah, he was. He's on a lot of X-Files episodes too. He was that alien bounty
Big
hunter
guy, workout buddy of Arnold's.
He was Shao Kahn in the Mortal Kombat movie from the 90s. Yeah, he's in a lot of stuff. But
Okay, what's the title again?
Dr. Mordrid, Mordrid.
Okay, I'll have to look that up. Now, does it play like a Doctor Strange movie? Does it
That was the entire plan was pretty much. It makes you wonder that if it was, there would have been an in-canon Doctor Strange that was probably Jeffrey Combs, which would have been
right.
really
But
cool.
my question is, how does it acquit itself as a movie? Like if you look at it as a Doctor Strange movie, you'd be like, this is a great Doctor Strange movie. Yes, no? How does it?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah. Although it's a little different. Like they probably changed a few elements of it. Like he's a wizard sent to Earth to stop another evil wizard from opening gate to hell. So it's kind of it's not like 100% just Doctor Strange done with a different name. So but I mean, Band always seemed to go to space for some reason in most of his movies.
I thought wizards were from Earth.
Well, I got a great.
Decades ago, before the renaissance of comic book movies, back when comic book movies were in their infancy, like when Ninja Turtles was new and Batman was new. They asked John Byrne what his favorite comic book movies were, and one of his answers was Masters of the Universe.
Oh,
and people were like, "What the hell are you talking about?" And he's like, "No. Before you get down my throat on this, okay? That movie is the New Gods chapter and verse." And if you look at it in terms, it's like, oh, wait a minute. Yeah.
I never thought of that before. Holy shit.
It's not He-Man.
Yeah, it's not He-Man. It's not He-Man.
Not He-Man.
It's a better representation of New Gods than
Skeletor's Dark Side, Orion. Did
you watch the Eternals? Did you suffer through the Eternals? Okay.
Yeah.
Do you realize that not only did they not use any of the real mythology from the comics, structurally, do you realize what that movie was? It's the Silver Surfer story.
Oh, from Zen Law. And,
yeah.
Instead of Galactus, it's the Celestial.
And they come to prepare it for it to be destroyed. Yeah. And, whereas the Silver Surfer has this fight amongst himself and also with the Fantastic Four to bring him around to do the right thing. Well, that's what happens with the Eternals. By the way, what made me nuts in that movie? They kept calling a character Icarus. Do you know how the character's name is supposed to be pronounced?
Icarus, I would guess, by the K.
Icarus. It's
yeah.
Icarus. Jack Kirby fucking tells you that on page 2 of the first issue.
Yeah.
There's a character named Ike Harris, and he says, well, the guy's like, is that your real name? And it's like, well, sort of. You need to run the two words together. So it's Ike Harris. And he says it, he just says it as bald face as you can say it. And people don't seem to realize, well, all the other names are not the Greek gods. They're all derivations of it, and they're all on their side.
Yeah.
So it's not Icarus. He would it would be Icarus or some other derivation. They're the same way that Zeus and Mercury is Makari and whatever else. But oh my God, what a memorable movie that was.
Well, they haven't mentioned the giant hand sticking out of the ocean in the rest of the movies yet. So.
Well, there's not just a hand; it's a head too.
It's a head too,
yeah. And you know what? My solution is it never happened.
It was all a dream.
I don't think it's going to get a sequel, but who knows?
We'll just pretend it never happened.
I'd like to see the Black Knight get his day in the sun. So there's that. That'd be fun.
Yeah, and they can introduce him somewhere else.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm an Avenger.
Yeah, why not? We'll throw I know it's getting to the I'm digging the Marvel movies, but it's also getting to it's almost like the Frankenstein monster that once it's now getting too unwieldy. There's so much going on and so much to keep track of that it's hard to get all together. But I'm still on for the ride. I'm happy.
They're trying to put too much out there at the same time. They made Marvel Universe, the MCU is built on very, very goofy choices and risks that when you step them, it's like, are you kidding? Iron
Mhm.
Man was not a top tier character. He's like a second tier, maybe a third tier character.
Yeah.
You know, basing your whole universe on him is extremely dicey. And the fact that they got Robert Downey Jr., who had a lot of problems at that point, the fact that you're putting this on the shoulders, like your whole, you know, if Iron Man had failed, if that movie had bombed, Marvel would have been put into receivership with a bank. The way that they structured the deal, Marvel would have essentially, you know, it would have been like an asset that got set, you know, like anyway, you know, they Marvel would have lost Marvel.
Again.
Yeah. And they took this chance on this character who's a secondary, tertiary character at best. And so and they're building toward an Avengers movie, and I'm thinking, I don't see an Avengers movie making a lot of money. I don't know.
I was never an Avengers guy either.
So cool. The Avengers were never that level cool.
Yeah.
So I don't see it getting an audience for more than you know, 50, maybe $100 million if they're lucky. And then they cultivated this whole universe. But then they made goofy decisions like, let's make a Guardians of the Galaxy movie. You know, and there's nobody out there that I thought that probably thought immediately, what a great idea. It's like, are you fucking kidding me? Guardians of the Galaxy? Really? And they had to have special screenings of the movie where it's like, come see this movie and we'll show you the first 15 minutes of Guardians of the Galaxy.
I was
because
at
they
that.
want audiences to know that there was something good out there. They took an incredible chance. And they took a lot of really great chances that all paid off for them.
Yeah.
But now they're making choices that look smart that aren't.
It's just,
And
it's overindulged.
taking
Like,
risks on things that aren't paying off for them, you know? I don't think that we needed Skir to be introduced at the end of She-Hulk any more than I think we needed She-Hulk to be the show that it was. I've never seen a show pick a fight with an audience like that one before. Literally,
I loved it, but I can see. But you're right. Like, it seemed like they well, it just seemed like you're right. It's like you're right. Like, they really just said, okay, well, you guys.
It was combative.
Everything we do, we're going to make fun of the core of the type of people we think are the ones that are hating these shows. Which they really ran at
fun of the audience, and then they got mad at us. They
like the Marvels.
Hang on a second. They made fun of us, and then they made fun of us for getting mad at them when they knew they were making us mad. And it's like, you know what? Look, you know, make the show you want to make, but don't pick a fight with me. And they literally picked a fight with the audience.
There were a couple times while watching She-Hulk where I wondered if they wrote the episode like after seeing the reaction from the previous episode. Like, it almost seems like
couldn't have. There's no way
well planned. No, I know. But like the way they planned out and knowing how the reactions that they were going to cause.
Well,
like
it doesn't take a whole lot of brains to figure out how fans are going to react to seeing She-Hulk twerk. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think it took, like, you know, some level of clairvoyance to figure out, you know, when they see She-Hulk twerking, how do we think they're going to, I don't know.
They'll love it. They'll definitely love it.
That's right. Yeah. Well, you know, like, get a big reaction out of them.
But like, there's little bits of, to me, genius in some of it. I just feel like there's just so much of it. Like, I thought the Werewolf by Night thing was super cool. I really dug that show.
Werewolf by Night was terrific. But
yeah, I'd love to see more
really
of that.
Great. The thing that made that unstoppably wonderful, Man-Thing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That was my fucking Man-Thing.
Yeah, mine too.
Ted.
They fucking delivered that.
Yeah.
And even
it's nice when they really grab one of those really obscure characters.
I didn't watch the color version, and I will someday. But the like, just seeing him rip through a wall and grab a guy by the head and him burn away from, like, you know, it's just like, I was like, like, the only thing that would have topped it is if Howard the Duck made a cameo, because that would have been like, just.
He's done a lot of cameos, old Howard.
Yeah, only Guardians in the background.
For Howard the Duck is for them to go back to the way he looked before Disney made them change how he looked.
Yeah, like
the original design is wonderful. Ever since they put him in pants and made his eyes weird.
Yeah, they made him smaller to make him look less like Donald Duck,
Yeah. And my feeling is, you know what? Change him back. What's Disney gonna do? Sue themselves?
You know what I would
Well,
like to see? I would
sorry.
like to see like the straight up old story, like the Bill or not the Steve Gerber original stories,
Gerber.
like with him just being like, you know, solve like being the or put him in the detective office across from She-Hulk, whatever. But even if they did like a Roger Rabbit situation where he's like animated on top of, you know, a live action, I'd buy that. I'd be down for that. Just, you know, anything that just like, cause make him a cartoon character that's in our world through a Terran reality, whatever. Like it's basically what he is anyway. He's like Slapstick from the old Marvel comics.
You
Like,
know, I've loved that character all to pieces since he was first introduced, and it broke my heart when they changed the design, and it broke my heart when it's like you know, it's like now that's Howard the Duck, and it's like no, Howard the Duck does not wear pants, does not have eyes that look like that, and by the way, he smokes
Destroyer Duck.
cigars. Fuck you all. He smokes
He definitely
cigars.
smokes cigars.
I had a good conversation on. I have another podcast where I talk to folks like yourself just about comics and stuff. So this one is specific to the X-Men show. But I had Steve Rude on recently, who did Nexus, and he did a bunch of work for Marvel and DC back in the day. And he talked about when Marvel made that shift where they wouldn't show people smoke in comics anymore. And he would draw his comics people smoking, and then Marvel would be like, "Got to take all this out." And he would get so mad about it, he would leave like the shadows and things in that showed them smoking, so you could see what the original plan was. But like if you were paying attention, and things like that. But it's funny that like I get where they're coming from. I mean, as a big corporation, you're obviously a lot of people are going to want to pick you apart for very stupid things. But I mean, yeah, they should. I mean, as someone who's a fan of the comics, like especially Steve Gerber stuff. Like, why not just make it? Why not keep the core of it what it is? You know, the beauty of like those comics were like a David Lynch movie in a Marvel universe. Like, you just got weird ass shit that didn't make any sense, and they threw it all at you, and it was really fun. And
They never stopped Kingpin from smoking.
Yeah, I mean, you know, like his biggest villain was a guy with a bell for a head. Like, it was just ridiculous.
Dr. Baum?
That's right. Like, like, you know, teaming up with Man-Thing, and like, I mean, especially even when they made the movie in the 80s, like it was just such a far cry from the tone of the original.
Oh no, that movie was.
We don't talk about that movie.
I know.
That movie is a crime against nature.
Yes, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
In Howard's very first issue, is he fights a wizard who lives in. He's a financial wizard, and he lives in a castle made of credit cards.
Gerber is was such a unique voice in comics. Like, he could never do anything normal, and when he tried to, it just turned into weird shit anyway. But he was such unique and cool, and some of his creations are some of the most like standout fun stuff from the Marvel universe that you're just not going to get.
Well, that stuff he was doing for Man-Thing was just on acid. I mean, it wasn't just a monster living in a swamp. The swamp was like the nexus of reality.
Yeah.
And so all kinds of weird shit would happen, and that's
do you remember that? Do you remember that Man-Thing movie? Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
You guys watched? Oh man, that was bad.
It was bad.
Well, another question I would ask you, Robert, before we get too long in the tooth here, is the Mask animated series. That was another one I watched a lot. What was that like to work on?
That was a lot of fun. That was the first time that Marty and I were acting as story, and Marty worked as a story editor, working with writers. Mm-hmm. And my feeling was I was much more interested in writing. So I story edited, like, if I forget how it broke down, but if it was like, 10 of them, right? Mm-hmm. Then Marty story edited like 6 of them. And I wrote 3 and story edited 1 or 2 or something like that. Mm-hmm. So basically he worked as a story editor on the series, and I worked much more as a writer / story editor on it, because I figured for that show it would be more fun to write than it would be to guide other writers. But that was a lot of fun. That was, we got to do some like really wacky shit, and it was terrific. It was I loved the time travel episode, A Comedy of Eras, and we did an episode called "The Angels Want to Wear My Green Mask," which was like, which was our clip show episode. But we got to we got to use the clips really, really in a very clever way. So it wasn't just a clip show episode.
Did you have much? Did you have much like input with the voice actors in that? Like, did you have much interaction?
Oh, we were there.
Oh, for all of it, okay.
We were there for the recording sessions.
Because there was quite a who's who of voice actors on that show. Like, I mean, Rob Paulson from Ninja Turtles, but like Frank Welker, Jim Cummings, Tim Curry, like Kevin Richardson, like all super cool. That must have been, and even Glenn Shaddix from Beetlejuice.
Tim Curry did a villain I didn't like,
Pretorius?
So I didn't use the villain, and therefore I screwed myself out of the opportunity to work with Tim Curry. And in retrospect, I'm not happy with me for that. I should have bitten the bullet and come up with a really good story for him, because then I would have written for Tim Curry. But I missed my opportunity. I also found out that there was a character done by Jonathan Harris, so I had a chance to work with Jonathan Harris I did not know about. So that didn't happen.
Well, I have a question sort of related to that. Of all the animated series you've worked on that were either based on a live action thing or became one later, which one do you think made the best live action? And of all the series you've worked on that haven't been represented in live action, which one do you think would make the best live action? Because they just announced the Gargoyles live action series.
They did, and I predict it's not going to be wonderful.
Interesting.
I mean, I would love it to be,
but being groundbreaking and make you forget the cartoon. I don't know. You know, you can't. The
cartoon was great. It would have to be pretty great.
I mean, Keith David has to be.
Like Batman Beyond, I thought was an idea for a really shitty series. I thought that, when they first started talking about it, I'm like, this thing's going to crash. And when I saw the first episode, I thought within the first 8 minutes, this is Batman's continuity. This is canon.
Yeah.
And they did for a series that I thought was built on such shaky ground. It wound up being, I think, the best action adventure series Warner Brothers ever did.
It's great. Batman Beyond is so good.
I think the Batman animated series is the best representation of Batman ever done.
Agreed.
But for like the sheer artistry, I think that Batman Beyond is yet beyond that Batman series.
I will argue.
The title for Batman Beyond was Batman Tomorrow.
Yeah, Batman Beyond.
They were forced to change it by the people and publicity. Realized how to promote a series called Batman Tomorrow. Yeah. I mean, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Tomorrow on Batman Tomorrow. Later today on Batman Tomorrow.
Same Bat channel.
Yeah.
What a fucking nightmare. Next week on Batman Tomorrow. What is it? Next week or tomorrow?
What's happening?
That is confusing.
Really funny.
It becomes its own Who's On First joke. So they had to come up with a different title, and they came up with Batman Beyond.
I will argue to the death that Batman Mask of the Phantasm is the best Batman movie ever made.
It's a wonderful movie until the third act and the Joker steals the movie.
Yeah, I don't think they needed to go that route, but I think the weight of.
Oh no, I'm with you.
Yeah,
I think it's. I'm totally with you until the third act.
I think making
Joker.
Well, even just revealing that he was some kind of no-name mob goon before, it doesn't like the Joker doesn't need an origin. It's better when he's just
the Joker. Absolutely doesn't need an origin.
No,
Joker origin they ever did was in The Dark Knight.
Yes. Yeah.
They just basically fucked with the audience, and it's like, yeah, okay, that's the Joker. I don't want to know where he came from. He doesn't get his story. He's just this. He's what he is.
When you don't know. Well, I always thought too, even as a kid watching that when it came out, because I would have been, it would have came out 94, 95, so it would have been like 10. I remember thinking that like. The Joker is dead now. At the end of that thing, when Andrea takes him away in the smoke, I'm like, well, he's dead. There's no more Joker, and she killed him. And then later on, he just keeps showing up in the animated series after, and I'm like, I don't understand why he's still here. Like, he should definitely be dead. Like the way it phrased, I'm like, this is a fitting end to him. this woman that that he ruined the life of gets to kill him because she'll go a step further than Batman would, and then it's like, oh wait, no, he's still alive. It's all back.
Well, it's its own thing.
Yeah, exactly.
It sort of happened, but it sort of didn't. It's this thing in its own little isolated bubble.
You gotta just like headcanon it that she dropped him off in a prison cell or something. But to me, it just seemed way more interesting that route. But I mean, it's the best version of like Frank Miller's year one that you're gonna get, where like you see him trying to learn to be Batman and try to be before he discovers the persona where he's just wearing a mask trying to help the cops. And how badly that goes, and he realizes the importance of the theatrics of it too, and all that sort of stuff.
What made no sense to me was in Batman Forever, there's
a lot of things that movie that made no sense. It's a lot of things in that movie that made no sense.
They have two villains. They have the Riddler and they have Two-Face, and the Riddler's kind of it's a given, right? Okay, the Riddler, he puts out riddles so that you can, to taunt you when he does a crime. It's a given what he is, right? So they didn't need to give him an origin, and they gave him an origin that just ate up a lot of real estate in the movie they didn't need to take up. Meanwhile, you have Two-Face, who 100% of the audience doesn't know, and they just throw him out there instead of giving him an origin that he needed.
Yeah, you literally get it on you get it in a news report where they're just like, "Oh, this is what happened to him," and it's like just in the background in the corner, like
it's just it was ridiculous. And Christopher Nolan totally dropped the ball in his Dark Knight trilogy. What he should have done was the fade out in the Dark Knight should have been the emergence of Two-Face.
Yeah.
And the third movie should have only been about Two-Face, because Two-Face is the villain who most reflects who Batman is. They both live bifurcated lives.
Yeah.
Bane doesn't relate to Batman in any way. And all I got from The Dark Knight Rises was Batman is there to save a city that does not deserve him.
Yeah.
Because the Gotham City that I saw in that movie, it's like, you know what? Fuck you people. Just fuck you people.
Yeah. I wanted
It's far too long, and they're shoehorning Two-Face into the Joker's movie. I think did a disservice to both of them.
Yeah. And they just like
Two-Face is the character who most, it's more like Bruce Wayne than any other of the villains. So that final story should have been about the two of them. I think the first issue of The Dark Knight Returns is the best Batman movie ever made.
Yeah, I can buy that.
It's just it is panel for panel, shot for shot. It just you can feel the pacing of the movie in that. It's the best Batman movie, and it's about Two-Face, and there are some panels in it that show you that Bruce Wayne totally understands what makes Two-Face Two-Face.
Yeah.
There's a parallel between them that is remarkably powerful.
Well, I got a snicker when we were talking about German expressionist films with the Metropolis poster, and you're talking about Batman 1 and how you felt it really missed the mark for Batman. Batman 2, Batman Returns, is probably like one of the most German expressionist films I've ever seen. The movie is like a weird German art house film.
Okay, my feeling having watched that movie was that Tim Burton did not want to do a sequel to Batman. It just didn't interest him. Batman made more money than God. They backed up a truck to his house and said, thou shalt make a Batman sequel. And he made the Batman sequel he wanted to make. And that was a love letter to German expressionism.
Oh, yeah, it sure was.
Which is why you had a character named Max Schreck, which is the name of the actor who played Nosferatu.
Yeah,
why one of the charshers looks like Caligari.
Yep.
One of the characters looks like Dr.
Oh,
Caligari.
right, yeah, absolutely. I never thought of that. Shit, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And it's like that movie it's just German expressionism.
The clowns, the penguins, like the
okay, all right.
The Christopher Walken
design in that movie Where did the character design of that movie for the Penguin come from?
What is it?
London
I've
After
seen that.
Midnight.
Holy shit. I never thought of that before. Wow. Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense.
Right down to the teeth.
Yeah. And
Look
then
at the penguin's
hands,
teeth
yeah,
and look at Lon Chaney's, vampire fangs. It's
the hair.
yeah,
Yeah, shit. Wow. I never even thought of that.
That movie is a love letter to silent horror films, particularly German expressionism. Absolutely.
It's funny because as a kid, I just didn't think it was like the first Batman movie to me. As a kid, I never really enjoyed. The second one I thought was bewilderingly strange. As an adult, I enjoyed them on a whole other level, but it's not for the enjoyment of the comic representation. Just if you look at it as a movie by itself, it's just bad.
Well, I don't know what the fuck I'm watching when I see Batman take a bomb, shove it in a guy's chest, and then shove him down a manhole, and then you see this giant explosion.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know what I'm looking at. If this was a Wolverine movie, I'd be on board.
Sure.
But that's not who Batman is.
No.
And
they always skirt that issue, but they never do it well. Like in Batman Begins, they're like, we need you to kill this guy that killed this farmer. Like when he's in the League of Assassins, they're like, because this is to prove that you're one of us. He's like, I won't kill. And then they're like, okay. And then it becomes a massive fight where everything blows up and definitely a lot of people die. Like there's no way all those League of Assassin guys get out of there alive. Like,
okay. You know where the first Batman movie totally loses me?
I thought Jack Nicholson's Joker was not like that was the worst version of the Joker I've ever seen. I like Jack Nicholson, but he's not the Joker.
Right. But where that movie loses me is in the beginning, you see this family getting robbed and terrorized. And then Batman shows up 5 minutes later to beat up the bad guys.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't protect the innocent. He just beats up the bad guys. Later on, the Joker says, at midnight, I'm going to release a poison that will destroy half of Gotham City. So 5 minutes after midnight, Batman shows up in a plane and he does acrobatics and poses in front of the moon. And then it's like, hey, asshole, shouldn't you have been there 5 minutes before midnight?
Spider-Man would have been there in 5 minutes flat.
But throughout the movie, he's always there too late.
Yeah,
and then there's a scene where he sends the Batmobile into the bad guy's lair and he blows it up and the Batmobile comes out and Batman's waiting for it. And it's like, so you're just a terrorist now. Like, I mean, you weren't even in the fucking car. What kind of punk ass Batman are you? He doesn't help anybody. He's not there in time to help anybody.
So, Bob, once we read your X-Men script, will you come back and talk to us about it if we don't drop too many spoilers?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I'm looking very forward to reading this.
Me too.
Yeah, but reach out to those guys who do, the
I'll send it off to them. Yeah.
movies and see what they have to say. I don't know. I'd be interested to have seasoned professionals read my script and let me know if they thought, I did a great job, or if I just, if it blows, that's fine.
It doesn't normally. I mean, I assume they wouldn't have you on if they thought that, because they generally have great conversations with. Like the most recent one, they're talking Stuart Gordon. They're doing a bunch of Stuart Gordon ones because one of his scripts just got made. Suitable Flesh, I think it's called. It's a H.P. Lovecraft adaptation that just got released. It's coming out on Shudder in January, but it has a limited theater release. It's got Barbara Crampton and Heather Graham in it. But
remind me about it so I can see it. I love Heather Graham. I think she's the most beautiful woman who has ever lived. She's just absolutely stunning.
Boogie Nights, man. So she was in. So because of that, they've had people that work with Stuart Gordon and talking about a bunch of projects that he never got off the ground. But one of them was one that was very interesting called Berserker. That was basically Schwarzenegger and Carl Weathers play wrestlers in the 80s that are playing heel wrestlers and really hate that they have to be the bad guys. And then Carl Weathers gets a hold of this experimental steroid that is given to him by some sketchy scientist that probably would have been played by Jeffrey Combs, as stated in the script. Basically, that makes him super strong, like even stronger, more jacked than he was before. But it starts making him really aggressive. So he tries to get off it, but as he gets off it, he starts turning into like a lizard monster. So Schwarzenegger gets on it as well. And then like after Weathers dies in his arms, he goes on a revenge mission to try to find the guy that made this, and then also try to like stop turning into a monster and losing his humanity. And it was very interesting, very like if this had got made in the 80s, it would have been a super cool movie. But there's a bunch of Stuart Gordon ones that like just never happened. So it's cool.
You know, he was signed to do Iron Man at one point.
Schwarzenegger?
No.
Oh, Gordon. Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, really.
Yeah,
Well, he had such an interesting career with his theater stuff.
There was one point where I think Tom Cruise was signed to do it, or they talked about him doing it.
Yeah, there's a whole. It's so interesting, like the world that could have been, the parallel universes that, aren't there. The other,
Well, I think
Gordon should have spent his entire career doing H.P. Lovecraft and going between larger budgets and tiny budgets.
he did mostly. Like, there's a lot of them. Dagon.
Yeah, there is.
Pit the Pendulum. All those ones, plus From Beyond and the Reanimator movies. I would have loved to see.
I'm glad they finally released the uncensored version of From Beyond, because when I saw the movie in the theaters and it was rated R, unlike Reanimator, it's like I just you can see all the punches that are being pulled.
Yeah,
you can see all the compromises that have been made. And no, man, come on, if you're going to give me Stuart Gordon, give it unleaded,
Yeah, the Scream factory release has the unrated one, and it's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing with H.P. Lovecraft is the greatest H.P. Lovecraft movie I think ever made isn't based on Lovecraft. It's kind of like Philip K. Dick. Mm-hmm. The best Philip K. Dick movies aren't based on Philip K. Dick properties. But if you look at the or Truman Show, those things, that's Philip K. Dick chapter and verse. And it's a better representation of him than any of the movies that have been made. So for me,
I had a lot of love for Total Recall.
The best H.P. Lovecraft movie that has ever been made is Alien.
Yeah.
It's pure Lovecraft. And after Prometheus came out, Guillermo del Toro said, "There's no reason to do Mountains of Madness now."
Yeah.
So basically, Ridley Scott was really good at doing H.P. Lovecraft in space.
Have you seen John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness?
I saw it a long time ago.
That's my favorite Lovecraft adaptation. Or The Thing. The Thing is very close to In the Mouth of Madness.
It's very Lovecraftian, yeah. I have a problem with Carpenter's The Thing, and
because the original.
I'm interested in seeing what a sequel would have been like.
Check out the
prequel was kind of cool, necessary. My problem with Carpenter's The Thing is exactly why Aliens is a classic. In Aliens, they differentiate between every one of the characters. They all have different personalities. You know who everybody is. You know what they do. You know how they feel about each other. By the end of that movie, you know who everybody is. And if you watch that movie 2 or 3 times, it just gets deeper and deeper and deeper. In The Thing, I'm just seeing a bunch of pissed off guys in parkas. I don't know who these people are. I don't know what the fuck they're doing in the South Pole. I don't know what their jobs are. I don't know what they're studying. I know one of them wears a silly hat and pilots a copter, but that's the only thing that distinguishes MacReady from anybody else. All the other characters have names like Windows or Childs or whatever. Okay, fine, they have different names. They're played by different actors. All the same character. I don't see anything in there. So my problem with The Thing is that I don't care about any of these fucking people.
That is its weak point.
Aliens, I cared about everybody. So I consider the thing to be. I mean, there are people who just think it's an absolute classic. I think it is for me, it's a 2-star movie on a good day.
No,
And there are things in it that are fucking stupid. I mean, these aren't just characters that you can't distinguish from each other. They're also very stupid people.
They are
At one
stupid.
point, we talk about, well, if any piece of this thing gets loose, it could turn into a whole new thing. It's like, okay, so what's their solution? Let's blow it up. And then I know, why don't we burn the place down? It's like, well, that's fine. Have you established that fire kills it? And
fire kills everything.
It's very, very surprising, by the way, was Stephen Colbert had John Carpenter on the show.
Yeah, just recently.
And he asked him, there are 2 characters left. One of them might be the Thing and one of them might not. Is there a way to tell if one of them is the Thing or not? And I watched the movie right after that, and I'm thinking, Stephen Colbert, if this is one of your favorite movies, and you're as smart as you are, how are you missing this?
Yeah.
You guys know what I'm talking about.
By the end of the film?
Yeah, at the end of the Thing.
Like, who's the Thing?
Yeah.
I don't know who the Thing is.
There's a theory. Right. The theory about the gasoline, is that the one that you're...
No, it's right fucking there.
Is it?
McCready is talking, and there's all this
the
vapor because he's talking in the cold.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Another character, I think his name is Childs.
Yeah,
he's talking, and you're not getting anything.
Right, so that is easy. Yeah,
I'm kind of thinking, if you're looking for clues, that's a pretty fucking big one.
Yeah,
fair enough. I mean, that is easy.
The mist coming out of his mouth, it's like he's almost Godzilla. I mean, it's just fucking giant clouds. The other guy gives you, I mean, so for Colbert of all people not to have picked up on that cue is very puzzling to me because he is a bright guy. I mean, the man speaks Elvish. You know what I mean? He's a fan who is a fan beyond fandom, and it's like, dude, maybe you saw it when you were so young that it never penetrated beyond that it was sort of stuck in your head. But if you really took a step back and looked at it, you'd be like, oh, right, they give it to you. Yeah. I've never read Who Goes There, which is the John Campbell story that the Thing is based on. Yeah. And I'd love to do that because I want to see what the original story was.
He based it on, he went back to the story and based the Thing on the story specifically, but he was a big fan of The Thing from Another World, the black and white movie then.
Yes, he was very, very clearly a fan of that. And that movie shows up in Halloween. But but John Carpenter's Thing is a lot closer to the original source material, which is one of the reasons that I want to read the story and see, okay, what did he have in mind? I thought that the prequel that they did was really terrific. But it was completely unnecessary.
No, yeah, you didn't need it. It's funny,
fellas. I think I hear the pitter patter of little feet up there, so I think we're gonna have to wrap this up in a minute because I have to go investigate.
It's like midnight.
Oh, it's 8:00. I've gone on and on and on. We didn't even talk about X-Men, did we?
That happens all the time in our interviews.
It's kind of better to get a vibe of who the creator is and what they do, right? Than just.
You have my email address, right?
Yep, 100%.
No, I'll get it from you though. I'll message you and get your email.
Okay. Send me an email with both of your email addresses in it. Like send it to both of us so that when I hit reply all, I will send you both. I'll send you the X-Men Evolution Bible because I'm very proud of that. And believe it or not, there are people involved with the production who deny that I was involved. They're like, oh, he was there in the very beginning. And I'm like, no, that's my fucking Bible. I developed the show. Well, yeah, but you weren't really there. I made the show.
Yeah.
And by the way, I fought to get Kitty Pryde on that team. I fought to make sure Nightcrawler was on that fucking show. I fought the fights.
Awesome.
And then they tried to pretend you weren't there?
Well, yeah, there were people involved who were like, oh, yeah, Skir says he was involved. And, there was a Bible, but we mostly ignored it. And I'm like, really? Did you ignore the part where they went to 2 different schools, which everyone thought was a stupid idea, but which made the whole show make sense?
Yeah.
That was a whole thing. Why are they going to 2 different schools? It's like, because if they're only at the Xavier Institute, you don't have stories. What's going to happen? Cyclops is going to lose control of his eye beams and Jean Grey is going to find out he's a mutant. They have to be with normal high school kids. Otherwise, you have no show. And so they had to be at the mansion, but they also needed to be at a normal high school with normal people. These are the fights I fought. And
that's what made the show unique and different, right?
Well, it'd be perfect for us to read that series Bible too, right before we start reviewing those episodes.
Yeah, we thought we're going to probably do an evolution next. So
okay, well let's talk again. And
anytime at all, happy to.
A script that will never see the dark of a theater.
Hey, you never know. Maybe
once our glowing reviews hit the airwaves,
listening and be like,
the MCU will be calling you.
Yeah, that's right.
Contact Taika Waititi and say, Taika, you need to make an X-Men movie, and this is your script.
Perfect. I will. If I had his direct line, I would happily do so.
There you go.
I think I have it here somewhere. I'll see
if enough people blog it.
That's right.
Yeah.
This could be it.
It was great talking to you guys.
You as well, Bob. Thanks for being on the show.
You too, and I can't wait to read this and then talk to you about it.
Yeah, I can't wait to read this either. This is awesome.
It's gonna be awesome.
Thanks, Bob. Have a great night.
Have a great day. Talk to you.